Fred, let's go back to Heather, your daughter. When was the last time you saw her?
Oh, years now. Must be 87. She was a handful, that one. Always answering back. Rose couldn't handle her.
Every monster has an origin story, and in the unassuming city of Gloucester, the story of Fred and Rosemary West began not with a bang, but with a whisper, a family joke about a missing girl buried under the patio. It was a joke that would lead police to a discovery so horrific it would scar a nation's psyche forever.
So, what happened in 1987, Fred?
It was an accident. An argument got out of hand. Rose rung me at work, said, "You better get home. There's been a bit of a disaster." When I got there, Heather was gone.
A disaster. That's a strange word to use for your daughter disappearing.
Well, you see, you've even got the killing wrong. You're trying to make out I just went out and blatantly killed somebody. No! Enjoyment turned to disaster. That's what happened in all of it. She's under the patio. Rose told me she put her under the patio.
In February 1994, acting on a tip from one of the West's own children, police began digging up the garden of 25 Cromwell Street. What they found would confirm their darkest fears and ignite one of the most complex murder investigations in British history. Frederick Walter West was born in 1941 into a poor rural family in Muchmarcle, Herefordshire. The family was shrouded in secrecy and rumored incest. Fred, who had a low IQ, left school barely literate and was obsessed with cars and mechanics from a young age. But another, darker obsession was forming. He began spying on courting couples, developing a violent and deviant sexuality. At 17, he was investigated after a young pregnant girl was found beaten. A pattern was already emerging. In 1962, he met a Scottish waitress, Catherine Rena Costello. She was charismatic, promiscuous, and already a mother. They began a relationship and had a child, but Fred's violence was severe. Rena would later tell friends, "He's a bloody animal." Meanwhile, Rosemary Letts was growing up in a troubled home in Northam, Devon. Described as a slow learner with a fiery temper, she was a chronic liar and a bully. By her mid-teens, she was promiscuous and deeply troubled. The catalyst came in 1969. Fred, now married to Rena and with 2 children, Charmaine and Anne-Marie, met 15-year-old Rose at a bus stop. He offered her a lift and then a job as a nanny. For Rose, Fred represented freedom. For Fred, Rose was a blank slate, a teenager he could mold into his perfect, compliant partner. Fred once mentioned during one of the police interviews, "I trained Rose to what I wanted. That is why our marriage worked out so well." The first murders coincided with their union. In 1971, Fred's wife, Rena, vanished. Fred claimed she had left to work in a bar. Shortly after, Rena's 8-year-old daughter, Charmaine, also disappeared. Fred and Rose told neighbors she had been sent to live with her real family. In reality, both were deceased, murdered by the couple. In 1972, Fred and Rose, now married, moved into 25 Cromwell Street. They painted it black and began advertising for tenants. The House of Horrors was open for business. For the next decade, a terrifying routine unfolded at Cromwell Street. The Wests targeted young women, tenants, hitchhikers, and vulnerable girls on the margins of society. The method was often the same. Lure a girl back to the house, drug her tea or alcohol, then subject her to brutal essay torture in a soundproofed attic. Fred would film their assaults. When they were done, the victim would be murdered, usually by strangulation, and dismembered in the cellar. Fred, with his trade skills, would then bury the remains under the floorboards or in the garden.
I was blindfolded, with my hands tied behind my back and a gag in my mouth. They were both involved. It was systematic. I only escaped because they fell asleep, and I managed to get to a window.
Caroline Owens reported the crime. The Wests were arrested, but the court treated it as a minor SA. They were fined and released. It was a catastrophic failure of the system. Had they been imprisoned, at least 9 young women might have been saved. The violence wasn't reserved for strangers. Inside the house, the West children lived in a constant state of terror. They were beaten, SA abused, and used as props in their parents' deviant fantasies. The eldest daughter, Heather, began to rebel. She threatened to expose the family's secrets.
Tell us about the day Heather passed away, Fred. What was the enjoyment that turned to disaster?
It was her birthday. We had a bit of a party. There was an argument about her going out. Rose lost her temper. When I came home, it was done. She was in the bedroom. I had to clean up the mess.
Clean up the mess? You mean dismember your own daughter?
I looked up and I see this knife sticking out. A bread knife. You could saw blocks of ice with it. I finally managed to do it. To take her head off and then her legs. That was unbearable. I can hear that now in my sleep. The children were the key. They were traumatized, yes, but they were also incredibly brave. They gave us the first, crucial pieces of the puzzle. They told us about the joke about Heather.
As the excavation at Cromwell Street expanded, the scale of the horror became apparent. The garden yielded one body, then another. Then the search moved inside. The cellar was excavated, revealing more remains. Then, the bathroom floor was torn up. The entire house was a graveyard. Fred, in custody, began to talk, almost proudly confessing to murder after murder. But as Fred confessed, he consistently downplayed Rose's role, often painting himself as the sole perpetrator who merely cleaned up the messes she started. Rose, meanwhile, denied everything. The partnership in evil was fracturing under the pressure.
It was a strategy. Fred thought he could control the narrative, protect Rose, and perhaps secure a better outcome for them both. He was a manipulator until the end.
Fred West was charged with 12 murders. The case seemed solid. But then, on the morning of January 1st, 1995, everything changed.
Frederick West, charged with 12 murders, has been found dead in his prison cell. The Gloucester builder was found hanging by prison staff. An inquiry has begun.
Fred West had hanged himself with a makeshift rope of bed sheets. He left no full confession, no explanation, and no testimony against his wife.
It was a devastating blow. We thought the case against Rose might collapse. Without Fred, it was her word against the world. We had to rebuild the entire case against her from scratch, without a star witness.
Rosemary West, accused of 10 murders, goes into the witness box to plead her innocence. She tells of falling for the lies of Frederick West and the locked cellar from which she was barred.
Rose West's trial began in October 1995. The prosecution painted a picture of a full and willing participant, a woman whose cruelty, they argued, often matched or exceeded her husband. According to the prosecutor, they argued this was not a woman acting under coercion. This was a partner, a collaborator, a woman who derived pleasure from the pain of others and who worked with her husband to lure, trap, and destroy young women. The defense strategy was simple. Blame Fred. They portrayed Rose as a victim herself, a simple, abused woman terrified of her monstrous husband. Frederick West was a psychopath, they said, a serial killer of unparalleled depravity. He dominated and terrified Rosemary West. She is guilty of only one thing, being afraid for her life. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. The testimony of survivors like Caroline Owens, the accounts of her own children about her direct involvement in the abuse, and her clear documented pattern of violence.
Rosemary West has been convicted of 10 of the most horrific murders in British criminal history. You will never be released, the judge said, if attention is paid to what I think.
On the count of murder of Charmaine West, how do you find the defendant?
Guilty.
As the 7 verdicts were delivered, anyone at Winchester Crown Court who was hoping for a reaction from Mrs. West was disappointed. There was no sign of emotion, no sign of contrition, as the jury slowly and methodically delivered the 7 guilty verdicts which placed Mrs. West high in the league of the most horrific mass killers.
The word echoes, followed by 9 more guilty verdicts. On November 22nd, 1995, Rosemary West was found guilty on 10 counts of murder. As she was sentenced to life in prison, with the whole life tariff, she screamed at the judge, "You don't know what you're doing. I'm innocent."
My client is totally devastated. She wept uncontrollably after hearing the verdict of the jury. She continues to maintain her innocence and retains the love and support of her children. She contests the verdicts, and we are actively pursuing an appeal on her behalf.
Frederick West took his own secrets to the grave in 1995. Rosemary West remains in HM Prison Durham and has never shown any remorse. The true number of their victims may never be known. This story is a stark reminder that evil often wears the most ordinary of faces.